And it's time for Money Matters. We've got the good doctor. We've got the good doctor, and he's rearing and ready to go for today's edition of Money Matters, the first for July 2024. Correct.
And how are you? Good morning to everybody. Jumps, how was your music festival weekend? I didn't see you out there.
No, I didn't really go.
You didn't go anywhere? I went to 2 nights of music festival, and I think at least one of our guests today.
3 of your guests.
3?
Okay.
Both,
Yes.
all of y'all went to
Yes.
the
3.
Yes, we went to
Yes.
something at least.
Did y'all do VIP?
Listen, we did VIP. Look at the tags. Of course,
Oh,
we did
okay,
VIP.
okay.
Very important people here.
Very important.
And
And did you enjoy your VIP experience?
listen, it was one of the best VIP experiences I've ever had. Think it's
And this is a
it's top.
fettle. And this is
And
a
this is a
fettle.
fettle.
I'm
It's a
fetting.
fettle.
Trust me, I've been fetting before music festival. Escape, went to all 3, went to White Sands. I wasn't playing and wait.
So
and
you were in Express Events VIP?
yes,
I ain't see
and
you
also
nowhere.
White
Okay.
White Sands.
That's good that I enjoyed it. I want to do a show on the value of VIP, so I'll definitely be reaching back out to you.
Sure.
But I want to say good morning to all our listeners and welcome to another insightful episode of Money Matters here on WINNFM 98.9. And as usual, I'm your host, Dr. Terrance Martin, and today we are diving into a topic that intersects finance, social justice, climate action in the Caribbean, feminist funding support. Now, as we are aware, climate change is not just an environmental issue. It's a multifaceted crisis that exacerbates existing social, economic, and gender inequalities. In the Caribbean, we are particularly vulnerable to climate impacts due to our geographical location and economic dependency on climate-sensitive sectors like tourism and agriculture. However, within this context, women and marginalized communities often bear the brunt of these impacts more severely. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
I did my research. I don't know enough.
You did
And we
good.
see
I
that
don't know
happening
much
right
about the
now
topic.
with
You did
Hurricane
good.
Beryl.
It's happening with Beryl,
Yes,
exactly. So this
exactly.
is where the concept of feminist climate justice comes into play. It is an approach that recognizes the disproportionate effects of climate change on women and advocates for gender-responsive strategies in addressing these challenges. The Caribbean feminist climate justice movement is at the forefront of this advocacy, pushing for policies and actions that are inclusive, equitable, and just.
Yes.
Right? And one of the key pillars, based on my research, for achieving feminist climate justice is obviously funding. And obviously
Yes.
that's why
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
connection to
Money,
the money
money.
show,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Money.
So feminist funding support refers to the allocation of financial resources in ways that specifically address the needs and priorities of women and marginalized groups. Now, in today's discussion, we will explore the various dimensions of feminist funding support in the Caribbean. We will examine the current landscape of funding for women-led climate initiatives, the challenges faced in accessing these funds, and the innovative solutions that are emerging. Now, to help us unpack these issues, we have some esteemed guests that I'll allow just briefly to introduce themselves before we cut to a commercial break and hear from our sponsors.
All right. Good morning, Sankis and Neves, and good morning, everyone who's listening. My name is Mrs. Tricia King, and I'm a marine biologist, and I'm Mermaid Tracy, and I'm also one of the advisory members on the Caribbean Feminist Climate Justice Movement.
Amazing.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be in Sugar City.
Yes, Sugar City.
Once again, morning to everyone who is listening. I am Arielle Ferdinand from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I am an environmentalist and also a member of the advisory committee for the Caribbean Feminist Climate Justice Movement.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Sasha Middleton. I'm originally Jamaican, so I'm a yard girl. And I actually live in Antigua and Barbuda. Antigua is basically my home. And I am also part of the Caribbean movement-led approach for the Advisory Committee for Global Fund for Women.
I'm just curious, what spurred, before we get into the, I'm sorry, where's Jams though? Let's cut to a commercial break while hear from our sponsors, because I was about to get into it.
Save or borrow money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Best Federal makes your needs a priority.
And we are back. And we have three dynamic women in studio today to talk about feminist,
So it's Caribbean,
Caribbean,
Feminist.
feminist.
climate, justice.
Not the
movement.
project,
What?
the funding aspect of it specifically.
Oh, so it's feminist funding.
So I was going right.
Oh, okay.
All
I
right,
got you.
let's get started. I want to hear from y'all and tell me, because yes, even though you work generally in the field of environmental science, marine affairs, what got you so passionate that you wanted to get involved in the advocacy part of it and join such a, I'm assuming, demanding committee, because I know it's probably on a volunteer basis as well. The smiles tell me everything.
Well, I could say for me, I grew up in a very small island called Bequia in the Grenadines.
Oh, I love Bequia.
Yes. Just a population of 5,000. And I could remember vividly in 1999 when we had Hurricane Lenny and how devastating it was for us, especially as a tourism-based economy. And that sparked my interest in environmental management and sustainable development. But later on, being involved in disaster risk management as well, I see how women are truly impacted by the impacts of climate change, not just for the fact that women are on the front line, helping to keep our homes together. They're often the individuals looking at the elderly, but also they're impacted when we are in shelters, for instance. So, instances of potential rape issues and so
abuse,
forth like
etc.,
that.
yeah.
And I think women, as sometimes the pillars of our community, they're the ones who will know what is happening down the road. They will know who all is in part of the neighborhood. They are definitely poised to be the one to champion issues. And I think in order for them to do that, it's important to provide the type of resources that would be needed. I mean, as Caribbean states, I mean, economies are hard, funding is difficult. So funding is a part of that, but also being able to develop their capacity as well to do so. So as someone who believes in the holistic development of our people and our countries, it just pulls me to this work. I see it as important and really pivotal, especially going forward in the future.
I think you'll get a keynote invite.
Listen,
next
I
year.
actually want to like clap. I'm like, oh my
I mean-
gosh, Aria, that was so good.
I've met very few people that impress me with speech. And I think you're right up there. I mean, either one of you. Let me hear from my Antiguan, Jamaican friend to my left.
Jamtegan.
What brought you to this line of work? And then we'll dig into some of the meats of the matter.
Okay, so for me personally, so I was involved more so in 2016. And Antigua and Barbuda is a twin island state, as you know, and we were heavily impacted by Hurricane Irma in 2017. It was a Category 5 plus. It was one of the strongest hurricanes in over 100 years. And I was extremely heavily involved. And at the time, we don't often understand climate change or gender impacts because what you don't know about, you can't care about. And for me, it was lack of awareness. Lack of awareness and education. So being there, being able to understand, especially with the single-headed households, the women weren't able to, get shutters or have the ability to even put up something simple as hurricane shutters to protect their homes. I'm looking at the fact that, they don't have any funding to support. So sometimes we come here and we have, the bright, innovative ideas, but at the end of the day, we have to also be realistic. Also, we have advocacy, but also funding is limited. And that's why we are here today, because I wanted to be a part of a movement, not just about, us advocating and talking, but,
Yeah, exactly.
I hate the talk
We're
shop.
done with that.
like,
There's so many talk shops
I'm
in
all,
this region.
let's put your money where your mouth is.
Yes.
Literally.
So we are here to advocate and to also empower women. And through empowerment, of course, it's not just building their capacity, but building their capacity as well, getting funding to support the work that they're doing.
Right.
Yes.
So, Miss King, Mrs. King, I stand corrected. So I've known Tricia for about 34
Probably,
years.
for real.
It's a lot of years, right?
Wow.
And I'm 28, so I don't even.
Like Trisha lied to me. I thought you were
So,
25.
I'm extremely proud of her and everything that I've seen her doing. And a lot of people might sit back and say, oh, she's doing it because it's her role in the government. And I don't think that's the case. So I'm going to start with this for you, since you're a committee member. Can you provide an overview for the listening audience, not too deep, on what the Caribbean Feminist Climate Justice Movement is and what is the primary objective in the region?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm ready. So this movement essentially started, it rippled with two key persons in Miss Aisha Constable and also Dr. Joyal Clark. And so they did a landscape study looking at where climate and gender intersect across the region, work that was being done, who were the key players, who was impacted, what were the impacts. And when I remember they actually traveled to different countries and they did multiple consultations so they could get from the people. Because again, if you can sit in a room and figure out, oh, this is wrong and that is wrong, but when you hear from the persons, when you hear that narrative, when you're able to translate what that narrative means and how can you fix it, proper, practical solutions, that needed the work, that needed for you to actually have that engagement. So after that initial engagement, then they had an idea of what would be needed. And the Global Fund for Women, they were very supportive in providing a lot of that resource allocation for that functionality to be able to happen. And so we are also grateful to Global Fund for Women for the role that they have had in getting us to this point. When we also look at, when there was a call actually that went out, because the structure that they envisioned was having an advisory committee with persons from all these key areas, so they're able to have that person on the ground and representative of the Caribbean, right? We have advisory members from St. Lucia, Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados are coming up, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, and Jamaica. Yeah, like we literally from top to bottom, we really scan it. And I was just going to say, so we are starting off with the English speaking, and we have very, very, very strong plans of including the Spanish as well as the French and Dutch territories. So again, if we are starting, but trust me, we have an amazing journey ahead of us, and we are creating this foundation that would be strong.
Oh, I mean, just listening to what the objectives and what you just described, it brings me back to a project that I'm now involved in. I'm a co-PI on a $2.8 million grant for looking at rural housing issues, right, and the intersection with finance. And I think what's notable in a lot of the...
You tap into this funding and just...
Well, I'm wondering, that's what I was going to ask. I didn't know if I had to be
we
a
are ready
woman
to tap into this funding. We're ready.
But
have three projects.
The greatness about the project, like what you said Dr. Clark did with Ms. Constable was... I was curious as to who did the economic impact, who looked at the financial issues surrounding that, because that's the critical piece too, right? So what would you say, though, are some of the key challenges facing women as a result of climate issues and here in the Caribbean? What are some of those key challenges you find that women face?
Well,
as it relates to that. And we could focus on the funding side.
Funding, okay, yes. I think for the Caribbean as a whole, when it comes to funding, one of the issues that donors have is scalability. So people are not giving you money for free. They want to see long-term sustainable impacts from the projects. So one of the problems we're having is that in terms of access to, there's not enough funding that is coming to the region for one, because donors find that it's not viable, it's not feasible.
Which is crazy to me.
Which is crazy.
We suffer from their
Exactly. We have not
Exactly.
triggered what is happening now, but we're at the front line as it
Dealing
pertains to
with
the
it,
impacts.
yeah.
In addition to that, I think in terms of within this space, even though we are here and we're a part of this movement, not a lot of women's organizations are aware of what the issues are, and you need to be aware in order to be able to advocate and be able to put your position forward. So, for example, if you're trying to develop a proposal for donor funding, you need to be able to speak the language, right? You need to have a song proposal, you need to have something that really speaks to the donors. And even in advocating for change and policy and so forth like that, you need data. And sadly, for many
region
Caribbean
is-
countries,
Let's all of them.
data is
Total.
yeah.
From Bahamas to Trinidad. You can't get no data for
Yes,
nothing.
and it's critical because you want to develop something and you want to fund something that is evidence-based, that is grounded, that is supported. And we have to realize that we're working within a world that is based on that. So these are some key challenges. So that is why we're so thrilled to be a part of this, because we're talking about funding, we're talking about developing capacity, but we're also looking at implementing participatory type research that really relies on the needs of the groups who we are looking to help and support throughout this movement.
I wanted to build on what Aria just said, because I want to concur with that statement and to also say that's one of the reasons why the Global Fund for Women is here to help with the Caribbean movement, because one of the main challenges is, you know, it's so difficult sometimes to access the funding. Like when you look at the amount of what the donors are requiring of, you know, administratively,
Trust me,
it
I have a call
becomes
after this. With one of my grant donors.
it becomes so difficult to access the funding. Even if
Yes.
funding is there, it becomes so difficult. You know, you have a long, wide array of different, and it's like, do you want us to access the funding or not?
Not,
And this is where
exactly.
Global Fund for Women is trying to break down those types of barriers to help it easier for, you know, our groups to access funding to support the work that they're doing.
So some flexible funding mechanisms.
Flexible funding,
Flexible.
flexible funding
Yes,
mechanism.
really
Because sometimes it's so stringent, not even just the processes, but even what you can do.
Yep.
With the funds.
They will tell you, oh, well, you can do this, and that's not the need.
Down to every
That's
cent,
not
eh?
the need.
Down to every
Every
cent.
cent.
I had to get permission for an air freshener. Using a grant to buy an air freshener for an office. So
And
I
it-
totally get it.
Yeah, and also too, whereas I did mention about lack of awareness with the people, lack of awareness with donors too.
What's the reality on the ground?
What is happening
Do
on
you
the ground?
know?
Like donors sometimes don't even see the necessary, it being necessary to fund certain types of,
Is it
you know,
just donors?
funding.
Because this leads to my next question. Because I assume Global Fund for Women is an international organization,
Yes.
right? Okay. So now let's take the international organization out of it that's already stepped up. We're talking about how can we get funds into the region. We already got money here. What are the governments doing? So how can governments better support feminist funding mechanisms to ensure that they're accessible and effective? Because oftentimes we talk about, oh, this organization ain't giving us money, or maybe we should look to the US, to China, Eurozone to fund these things. But we have money here. And as a region, we've taken on the decision to, for example, push things like cruise tourism that I know affects our coral reefs and all these different things, right? So what are the governments doing? How can they better help?
So I can see from I think it's a Navy's perspective that the Ministry of Environment and Climate Action has been a true partner in helping us with some of the support that is actually needed. And that is, and I'm not advocating for, I mean, I work for the government, but I'm advocating for the way that they have stepped up and they have come on board. And so I'm thankful to not only Dr. Jahia Clark, who also leads that ministry, but also Pierce, Colincio, Levine, and all of the support staff. We actually have project staff and communication staff actively in our engagements today, so that there is a connection between what is happening, what we are saying, what is needed, and what they can do, and how they can actually
I
represent.
love that response, but you didn't answer my question.
I answer your
How
question.
can they
I answer
better?
your question.
How can they better support? I want specifics here. How can they better support feminist funding Because sometimes stepping up means in talk shops ways,
Okay,
right?
no.
Okay.
No, well, it's not in a talk shop way. But I'm going to say that based on, for all of the grantee partners that I have seen, based on there is government support that is
Okay,
also
that's a
happening for
part of that.
co-financing
Okay, so there's a match.
arrangements.
There's a match type
yes,
of- okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's some of it is informal and some of it is formal. And I know
Okay.
you want it to be more formal, but sometimes the informal you get more. I am telling you, the informal sometimes you actually get more when it comes to co-financing. So a lot of the work is very community-based organizations,
Okay.
feminine-led organizations, and we didn't even say this part yet. It's 22 organizations from across the region.
Okay.
Co-
They've
from
come
Bahamas
together.
come down
As
to no,
NGOs?
not come together. Who is receiving the funding?
Who's receiving
Yeah,
the funding now to
yes.
carry
This is
out
tangible
the...
Carry the work,
funding.
yeah.
Lovely.
Co-funding.
Who's getting that in St. Kitts? I'm curious.
So in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have the Capistia. Now I'm going to say fisherman only because that's the official name, but they are in the process of changing
Fishermen
it.
and fisherwomen?
No, it's fishers
It's
or
fishers,
fisher
okay.
folk.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fisher
So
folk.
so when they change it, so I'm going to talk as if they've changed it already. So the Capistia Fishers Fish It Marketing and Supply Cooperative. There's also the
Okay.
Garden of Rebirth, that is a domestic violence shelter, but
Yeah.
they're changing it. Yes,
Okay.
yes. It's run by Ms. Etsu Bradshaw Keynes.
Okay.
And then there's the St. Kitts and Nevis Reef Guardians.
Okay. Nice.
Yes, yeah. So
Nice.
it's a good mix
So
of
the
true
funding call
climate
came
and
out and people applied and got...
so, well, this process actually had a nomination process.
Oh, okay. Initially, just to get the
this
ball
the
rolling.
initial
Yes.
phase is nomination, and then the second phase is rollout call.
I wanted to also say, with regards to Tricia, something that tangible that governments can do is have allocation in their budget.
Oh,
when
see,
it
this
comes
is what I wanted
like-
to say.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
But sometimes you have to finagle.
But because in addition to what she said, if it's not in the policy, if the national policy is
Yes, it's not
supportive, then they don't feel that they're accountable, right? And even if you have certain allocation towards, I know that sometimes we have funding that is supporting healthcare. There's all types of ministries or different things are getting, taking priorities basically. But I would say even just allocating some of the funding, the development funding towards specifically for feminist movement, the types of projects and programs, just having something that the government can take accountability for.
For
Yes.
example, so period poverty, when it comes to the Nevis gender, and that is why I said sometimes it's informal.
Okay.
The Nevis Gender Department, they do an amazing job when it comes to addressing period poverty from their budget. And so tapping into something that is existing,
into
because they are
something that's
very
existing, yeah.
they are very aware. So tapping and the St. Kitts gender as well. Let me do Chanel, I got you. Yes. But I was just there and we were talking about a specific project. So that is what came to mind. But having those kind of linkages and support is very important, and even just knowing, because maybe health doesn't even know that there's period poverty and what is period poverty in terms of what they can do
So
to
more
help
internal
support.
communication
So sometimes,
across the
yes,
government,
exactly,
departments,
so that they
so-
could understand.
So let me ask you guys this. So we know we've heard about the problems, right? One of it being funding. But and you like you rightfully said, sometimes donors want a little bit more, right? You need to sell them a story.
Yeah.
So tell me a success story of somebody or a group that has benefited from the funding. I know it's
Just
still early
giving it- no,
days.
we
You're
just giving it-
now?
just giving it.
Okay.
They're just
Very
learning
early.
St.
So
Kitts
then
today.
let's do this. Let's do this then. Let's reshape this question and say, what are some of the outcomes that you have funded? What are the expectations of the
Some of the
funding?
types of
Yeah,
projects.
so that
Okay.
already that are being funded. What are some of the expectations
No,
of those?
so okay. Terrance, they have not got the
I
money
know they
yet.
get the money yet.
We can talk about
We're
the
talking
project.
future, that's what I'm saying. The
projects
expectation
and
of the project.
Yes.
What's the
Okay.
expectation
Yes.
of the outcome of the project? Why did they get this funding? They got nominated, but there must be a reason why.
Yes.
What
So you
did you
want to
see
talk
that you
about-
liked?
Well, in terms of outcomes, I think one of the things that we want them to see as well, because to be quite honest, there are few groups that work really well within that intersection of feminism and climate justice and gender justice. So one of the things we want them to really, well, what we wish to see is a greater understanding of what it is, because sometimes when people hear the word feminism, there's often a negative connotation of what it is. But when you talk about feminism, we're talking about the innate qualities that females often possess, you know, being nurturing, being inclusive, being equitable, and just having an understanding that, you know, everything involves and is connected. So a greater understanding of that.
Okay.
In addition to that, being able to have the capacity to be able to advocate for the things that affect them, right? So for example, being able to have the knowledge to advocate for policy changes, to advocate for things that they want to see done within their community, but also being able to execute their projects. For example, one of the groups in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they're called We Are Myra Inc. They're a female-led, woman-led organization, and Myra is the smallest inhabited Grenadine island, just 300 individuals, and one of the world's top 10 beaches is located in Myra, which is the Salt Whistle Beach, and it is near destruction. So they have a coral reef restoration project that they're engaged in. So to have them successfully complete this would be really great. So I think one of the things that we want to also see is a successful completion of maybe phases, if not the whole project of what they're, you know, having back on doing. Of course.
Well, something happening right now.
Yeah.
Because
With
you're talking
the
about
barrel.
coral reef restoration, and I'm just thinking Hurricane Beryl is going to present so many challenges just for that, because even looking at whether or not this group was even able to get a standard, like a snapshot of what is there, what is the issue, because now a storm is going to hit.
So it's gonna
It
change.
is going to change so many things. So I am just like, my mind is,
And with sea surface temperature rises as well.
of
'cause
course,
it's
of
hot.
course.
And we had a
is
massive
hot.
coral bleaching episode
Yes.
last year, and we're slated to have another one this year.
Yeah.
Coral
and
bleaching.
coral
Bleaching.
bleaching, and also there's a coral disease that is actually killing. So it's a long name because they just describe it versus name it. So it's a stony coral tissue loss disease. So all of the stony corals are having their tissue being lost. So literally they're
Okay.
just, yes. So that is something that's impacting us regionally,
Okay.
right?
There's-
So
There is actually something that we totally forgot to mention. It's $550,000 that we are distributing
yeah.
to all
Wait,
the
per
grantees. No,
What do you mean, total?
you're jumping the gun.
What do you mean? What
You're gonna-
currency
you're
is
gonna
this?
listen.
US?
You're
You're
gonna
saying
listen.
bold, slow
You're
down.
gonna listen.
Okay.
Come. So we have 550,000 US dollars that will be distributed to the 22 grantees, which is $25,000 per grantee. I just wanted to mention
Let that sink in.
let that sink in, because it's not a little bit of money, you know. And at the end of the day, even though it's small, you know,
In comparison to, like, $1 billion.
at the end of the day, too, one of the things that we want to do is to ensure too sustainability of the project, because I know you just asked that. So building their capacity in a way that they not only have to rely on Global Fund for Women for the funding, but also being able to tap into other financial and technical
Resources.
So that segues nicely into another question, because honestly, I'm grossly disappointed. I felt hurt
No.
at the I know it's it's still something to celebrate, but
You know how much? No. Let me answer you. You know how much money? Let me tell you, because sometimes a lot of this funding, it is stringent, all kind of million loopholes, and it's $5,000
Yes.
US or EC
So
that
this
they'll
is
be
a- this is a
getting.
good
So this is
sizable-
good.
So,
good,
and it could be
good.
enhanced too by, this is one way in which governments could
The
enact. Let's say they need to,
co-financing.
for example, bring in things or import things, duties
course.
could
Yeah,
be
some
bringing in.
course, that is what I'm
So
concessions,
these
yes,
kind of things.
Tangible,
So
tangible things.
hopefully they're buying in that when they don't
Yes,
give any trouble.
but-
But to your point just now, though, an important thing would then be, what role can the private sector play in not only supporting but promoting feminist funding for climate justice? Because that's where it's gonna come from,
Yeah.
right? 'Cause if we're gonna have sustainability,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
not coming from government. You said they're doing their part. International organizations doing their part. Who left? The private sector.
Private, of
Yep.
course. So increasing public-private partnership and but locally, and it's actually regionally, because we're looking at developing civil society organizations which tie public private sector and government sectors and NGOs and community-based organizations
Sounds like a
to
lot of
have.
cooks.
Huh?
Sounds like a lot of cooks in one pot.
No. Those are all the stakeholders. Those are all the ingredients.
Okay.
Those are the ingredients into the pot, so that when you stir it, you actually get proper co-financing arrangements. You get support where it's needed, and so the international organization is giving this amount. You can give that amount. That amount can come from you, so it works together for a feasible outcome.
And it also doesn't have to just be money, right? You
could
could
be
have
things.
volunteers,
No,
it
it
could
could
be
be
time,
yes,
it could be-
yes.
That's
So-
what Tricia started off
Yeah.
with.
Of course.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, but just to add to what Teresa said, I think one of the things that we have not done well is engage the private sector
Right.
in a meaningful
Generally.
way. So we look for the traditional funding sources, which would be government and international organizations. But you have regional brands. I mean, I don't want to call names, but regional hotel
Yeah.
chains and even
Don't get
And
few.
communication.
We know who you mean.
Yes,
We know who you
yes,
mean.
fast food chains as well. I think it's important to bring them on board to say, hey, you're using the resources within the region. Yes, you might have some little CSR promotion, but you need to be more meaningful and more
CSR
intentional.
means for the general
But-
public.
Yes, your
But
corporate
then-
social
That's an
responsibility.
alcohol
yes.
here, right?
Exactly, that's
So
alcohol.
yes, you
That's why I
sponsor
had to let
football
you-
match, you sponsor
Yeah.
some uniforms. We need to go beyond that.
But
yeah.
remember what I literally said this morning. People, what they don't know about, they can't
Yes,
care
yes,
about.
exactly.
And that's why we have to also, education and awareness may be used loosely, but in fact, if they don't know about
It is
it,
critical.
they're not going to. So we
Thank
too have to be very forthcoming with how we are engaging the private
Yes,
sector,
very
having them
so.
within our spaces,
yes.
so that they have an understanding and the need for that.
So
Yes.
as someone who's had, in business or done consulting, etc., if I'm somebody and
You're
I'm
offering
saying,
your services?
No, no,
I put you on the spot right
I
now.
already want to help with the
know.
research piece, but that
Yes.
25,000 got to be a little bit high. But but no, seriously though, as somebody, a GM, a CEO of a company, and you guys come to me, one of the things I'm gonna want to know is
Economics.
what's the economic impact,
Yeah.
right? So from an economic perspective, God, this is just flowing, man. Like, it's just- but from an economic perspective, how does feminist funding support contribute to the overall resilience and the development of local economies in the Caribbean? And let me preface this. When companies donate money, let's not be delusional. It's not altruism.
Of course.
Right? They're donating to get promotion because you're going to see them, and hopefully that triggers them. You come in and patronizing their goods or services. So, from an economic perspective, how does support from the private sector of anybody actually lead to greater development within our economies in the region?
That's a big question.
You
Most
already
important
started.
question.
You kind of answered it like put
Yeah,
it
we
together.
had, we have contributed to this answer. So, okay, when it comes to narrative sharing, something that we actually didn't mention. So this Caribbean movement is not just happening in the Caribbean.
Okay.
There's also an Africa-wide movement
Nice.
and a Pacific movement. And we have been in talks, and also, we've tangibly done this. So not just talks, but we actually have persons from the Africa-wide movement represented here so that we can strengthen those relations
You do some
across
exchanges?
movements. Yes,
Mhm.
yes. We have done exchanges. We have done regional and international sessions where we had a contingent go to Rwanda last year so that we could have made those connections, and we had all of the movement committee members meeting and having that kind of discussion and engagement. So just think about your local brand then being cross-shared to the Pacific
There you
region,
go.
to the African
Completely
region,
new market.
like completely new markets, right? So get on board, message me, call me. You could reach out. We're here, right? To support feminist funding, because it really does have a whole scope, a whole new world. I literally
I see
heard
what
the song,
you
but I
said
can't
there,
sing,
yeah.
so I wouldn't do that publicly. But it literally would open a whole new world to who you can tap into, and who you can market.
But I did say though that they can't afford not to participate
cannot
because
afford not to.
our economy is largely driven by tourism and largely driven by agriculture still, right? So we can't afford not to,
Not to.
because if we don't do anything, then what we're seeing a category 4 in June,
This is
right?
well, we were saying
July.
June, but today is July,
Yeah.
and I'm like, in June, why in June we have a category 4,
And
and
Exactly.
it
The
is
heat
huge,
wave,
huge
The heat
across the
wave.
region.
But even more closely, like I think you said you went to White Sands, right? And over on that beach in particular, I remember as a child there was this rock that was on the shoreline, and now that rock is very far out in the water.
Yeah.
So we see visible evidence, and especially most of us that we have areas that are on the water. I think our private sector cannot afford to
Exactly.
ignore.
Exactly. And that is what I just wanted to add, because supporting feminist funding means building resilience. I know it's a word that is
Yes.
often used, but it builds people's capacity to cope with disasters, right? And you want that as a business, because it means now you have a larger market base that has more economic stability to further partake within your business, and also to build the natural resources that we depend so heavily on. You mentioned tourism, you mentioned agriculture. We need these industries.
Marine
And what we need to
environment.
realize, these industries can't exist without having proper resources. The condition, the state of the resources is tied to our products that we're selling.
And many of us, we are high income countries too. So
We did that to ourselves.
and
That's
now
just
we're
a
here.
basic lack
Now
of
we're here.
economic
Now
understanding.
we're here.
in reality, Antigua and Barbuda, for instance, I think St. Kitts too, right?
St. Kitts and
St. Kitts and
Nevis.
Nevis, high income
CBA
countries,
did that.
and so now they're forcing basically concessional loans if you want to support.
we
you know,
shot ourselves in the foot. That's an entirely different show.
Listen, I was just going to say, I was
yeah.
going to say, Sasha, we ain't even got here right now, but since we opened the can a little bit, we really need to understand that it is critical. What we need, we need to protecting the environment protects us.
Yes.
In every
in
single,
facet.
every single intersect, every single circle, every single layer.
Everything.
Protecting the environment protects us and ensures our survival and our sustainability.
How important do you think is the community involvement in an initiative like this, and especially at the grassroots mobilization? I know, Tracy, I've seen things that you have done personally, which have, I'm assuming, affected policy. I have you to
Of
blame for
course.
those nasty straws that I have to drink out of, either break up in my mouth or get soggy.
We're going
But-
to come up with alternatives, and this is where innovation.
But I know
Yes,
in
we were
Antigua
talking
too-
about
this is just
straws
in the
last night.
interim.
Yeah, but,
Yeah,
but I
this
know in
innovation.
Antigua too, it's been at least 5 years since y'all banned like
plastic ban.
styrofoam, and
Styrofoam,
those kind of
single-use
things, right?
plastic
and that
bags.
was a bold move by the Brown administration, and you know the rest of the region, they're slowly coming to
Coming,
the
yeah.
to the fore.
I think we're actually one of the last ones to, and we started, let me tell you, let me don't get a thing, but we actually started. I remember me and Dr. Joyal Clark and I, we are on the St. Kitts Sustainable Destination Council, and for about 11 years ago we actually did a lot of the work to help to even promote Plastic Free July, Plastic Be Gone campaign, the no plastic. Listen, we've done so much work, and I mean, I'm very proud to say that we are at this point, and we are doing it in a phased approach, because we've also learned best practices from different countries of how to even approach this. Yes, and so I'm really, listen to me, y'all. Listen to me, young people. I know you are going to change the world, and please listen to me. We need an alternative to so figure out biodegradable plastic-like straws. Figure it out so that we can function better.
Right?
Figure that out. Do whatever you need to do. AI, whatever you need to do. Figure it out so that we can drink a little easier, please.
But just to mention, to get back to your point with importance of grassroots input,
Yes.
and I'll give you my local context. It might be an unpopular comment, but we've banned single-use plastics, but we haven't been able to successfully do that. You know why?
Enforcement.
But can poor people afford to buy
Well, yeah, there's that.
flour in the nice big packages? They buy by the pound,
Yeah.
right? On the rural sides. So these are something that we need to also take into account in developing our policies and developing our mechanisms, that things won't be smooth, but it's important to consider everyone along the spectrum.
Some of that is producer engagement, right? Because,
Yes.
for example, in Utah,
Yes.
none of the beer in Utah could be more than 4%. So obviously, the state of Utah went to beer producers and said, hey, no more than 4%. So we could have some of that engagement
Yes.
from our government's
Yes,
level,
yes.
And this
especially
is
if
also
it's
where private sector
if
comes
it's-
in, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
like provide viable alternatives. And
Yes.
there's some plastic bags that are biodegradable. I did a science experiment. This was when I was in high school. So there are some that said biodegradable weren't, but some that didn't say anything. They were actually biodegradable. And like just put those alternatives, so that it doesn't even look different. Right, so you could still have the same feel, but the end
Functionality.
product is what you really want.
But even our academic institutions, we have the University of the West Indies and other academic institutions in the region. I think it's important for us to start creating solutions that are Caribbean oriented for us.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that honestly there needs to be a greater call for you within
But
these
they
discussions.
need
to
money,
come.
though.
That is
the
true, but-
research, as an
But they're blaming the
academic-
government, sir,
well,
because
but
they say the
it's
government's not paying.
But it's the government. So, but they need, trust me, to get it, they need
Yes.
so much research to support.
But they need
the
to tap into the
solutions, though.
diaspora as well. I
Then-
mean,
and then they
come
also
on.
need to engage
The
the
diaspora
community.
broke.
Oh gosh.
But the community-based organizations, some of the projects, they are easy to create research around.
Okay.
So if you
Yeah.
think about true partnership, for example, the St. Kitts and Nevis Reef Guardians, they're actually looking at a multi-trophic aquaculture system.
You just use a lot of big words.
A lot of big words to say that they're looking at having a system in place where you have zero waste being created.
Okay.
So you have different organisms in it. Some eat what some,
Waste.
release.
And
But we've seen some
right?
positives too, right? Like in St. Lucia with the use of the sea moss and
Yeah.
seaweed
Of
and
course,
stuff
of
like
course,
repurposing and all that.
Sargassum, the
Yeah,
sargassum. Said the
yeah,
right
yeah,
word.
yeah.
Thank you so much. And we actually have a local. I mean, it's not a part of this, but we have like local projects dealing with sargassum and
Okay.
stuff, and that research because the pilot project, we're doing a replication here, Mr. Griot Taylor. Oh God, he have all last names as his name.
Oh, my
Something Griot Taylor, right? But he's actually, the research that is done in Mexico, he's replicating here with sargassum. So it's a really good,
nice.
I can't remember the name of it. Lord, don't
And
vex
people
with
is
me,
just
but
in the center
yes.
of development. So it's very important because we are the ones that are being heavily impacted. So you always have to have a bottom-up approach in
Yes.
everything that
Everything.
you're doing.
You have to.
Because
Otherwise they ain't
we're
gonna
the
pay.
stewards of the
Yeah.
environment. We know what's happening underground. It's sometimes you have the problem where there's a top-down approach and not having the community grassroots. They're the one that have the traditional knowledge. They're the key holders and stewards of the environment.
movers
You
and
know, you have to
shakers,
ensure that there's no environmental and social safeguards impact.
impacted.
Exactly.
So here's
we also include we have indigenous persons that are also receiving
Nice.
grant
Yes.
funding
That's
and
good.
stuff.
That's good.
So Mackie, she couldn't be here physically because of all of the hurricane story, but she represents the indigenous community, Wakichan, indigenous community in Guyana.
Okay.
Yes, so those we are being as inclusive as we can.
I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Inclusive
we
words.
are being very inclusive because feminist, not global North feminism. We're talking about that.
You
We're
need to
talking
make
about
the distinction. I think
Caribbean
it's
feminism. That
it's
is
very
why the
important to
Caribbean
make the
feminist,
distinction,
Caribbean
I
feminism
think.
really is how we function
Yes.
on a day to day.
Yes.
And how we look at things and how we engage and how we function, really, our culture. So it is really just giving that term, but it's what we do. So having that inclusive approach where the community is who we are and who we protect and who we involve and how we move to getting better solutions and inclusive solutions, and the youth are involved heavily as well.
Okay.
So you have like a generational flow in terms of how we are moving forward. So everyone kind of gets, everybody's in. Everybody's
wanna
in.
get
No
the-
one left behind.
I want to. I'm about to make sure of that, right?
Yeah.
Because I have a question. Because the feminists, we can't. That's what feminists fund and support. What happened to the men?
And then I know.
Well, hold on. What about the men? Because if you're talking about agriculture, male dominated, you're talking about tourism outside of certain jobs, also male dominated,
You're talking about the ocean,
right?
male dominated.
Okay, so, but so therefore, can't men
I
be a
just said
part of?
Caribbean feminism. So again,
But it's still the word feminism, though. So
Well, it's
here's
still
the
the
question, Tracy.
you know you're a
You see how
feminist.
she-
You know you're a feminist.
I'm a feminist?
Gotcha.
Yes,
Let's
yes,
go.
he
Let's go.
is.
So
Let's
how
go.
does the intersection of gender and climate justice how will that help with the sustainability? Because if we're not going to leave anybody behind, and to move this thing forward, you need the buy-in of men, right, and the support of men as well. That's the question.
So-
These kind of daggers are over here. Daggers.
So, one of the measures of inclusivity, we also have persons living with disabilities.
Okay.
And so, of course, men are also living with disabilities, right? And I'm taking it from that angle. So you see, it's not like we're not going to only help a woman living our child. Of course, he is.
Asking what somebody might think.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. He would also be included, right? He is also a focus. A lot of these groups, even though they are women-led, they have men in it. Like, so men are benefiting. There's not like Global South feminism is not a man-hating parade or whatever tantrum. It's not that, right? The patriarchal system is what would be the issue, and the patriarchal system sometimes is an issue for men as well. So is really trying to beat the system, and so it's not about gendering the involvement. It's about having everybody on board so we could move forward. Anybody else wants to
And I
go?
was thinking that it's important to know that feminism does not mean the exclusion of men from spaces.
Right.
So, for example,
That's good to say.
yes.
Caribbean
Let people
feminism.
know.
Caribbean
Yes. So,
feminism.
CWIL, I'm a member of
Focusing.
CWIL SVG, and allyship is a big thing for us.
Yes.
So, in our meetings and in different things that we do and consultations, of course, men are involved because I think it would be disingenuous and we would not follow the feminist way if we don't take into account the impacts of men, the impacts on boys, and so forth within this space. So I just want persons to understand feminism and what we're talking about does not exclude men within the
Good.
spaces and also
Had to
within
make
the
that
decision making. I think that is important, but it's more along the principles and the values that we work on.
Yes.
But just that for these organizations, they're not woman-led, but not
Okay.
exclusionary to men.
Correct.
Understood.
And we have to always be so careful with how we marginalize men.
Very much
Okay,
so.
you know, we don't want to marginalize anyone. And also champions. Men
Yes.
would be great champions.
Yes.
When you go to the international arenas, you would realize even for like gender discussions, you see males being co-chairs and chairs of these very important meetings. And it says a lot. It speaks a lot because sometimes you see these discussions and there's no men in there. And it's also not just about education and awareness, but also sometimes men feel excluded. It's now to the point sometimes that they
Yes.
would feel that, okay, it's just all about women, so let me, this is not a part, this is not affecting me or whatever, but not realizing that it does. And you have mothers, you have wives,
we have
sisters, you know,
Women
so.
have sons.
You know, I'm
Yes.
just thinking, I'm sitting and thinking, and how can you support as a committee these grant recipients, these 22 soon to be grant recipients? And I think for sustainability, we need education, we need awareness. So I encourage y'all to think about how you could support them, especially if you're gifting granted to rural-based organizations. They might not be the most tech-savvy, social media heavy. So people have to be made aware of the things that they're doing. That's how you're going to get more funding, right? Like I literally got an email today asking me for an impact story for this grant that I received. How did you impact that little black girl, right? Literally, that's what they want because the funders want to promote it.
Yes, of
And they go to
course,
their
of
stakeholders,
course.
and so we attract that. So I think that's one of the ways. So hopefully you have something like that in place.
So we have what we're going to be doing even with the project, and remember we talk about sustainability, having case studies, having documentaries, like we would probably have them to do videos of the impact of the work that they're doing.
But we have to disseminate. I'm just saying
We
because
literally just
we
hired
are
a communication
Yes.
consultant
That's
so that
great.
and we have
Okay,
a
good.
strategic
So
communication
you're putting
plan
some
that is
real
coming,
money
of
in it.
course,
Okay.
because it has to be intentional.
You see, this is the problem now, because he done broke the record already. Now you're saying, are you still coming with it?
The good thing is that it's coming and you got the opportunity to say it's coming.
Of
Yes.
course,
Because
for sure.
we, as Caribbean people, we know our governments or institutions do great things sometimes and we never know.
Yes,
That's true.
We have
that's
all
true.
these conferences, spend all this money traveling the world, come back, nothing is ever shared.
It's
So
true.
let me ask y'all. We have about 5 minutes. So this is probably our final
What?
question.
We couldn't do 2 hours.
Tell Win I said Jamster behind there.
We need an extension.
So looking ahead, right? What are the key priorities for the Caribbean Feminist Climate Justice Movement in terms of funding and resource allocations? What are your key priorities? Let's say next 5 years, 10 years. Hopefully, y'all still involved.
I would say one of the key priorities is to become sustainable. Not just even for us at the Global Fund for Women and Caribbean MLA, but also for the groups as well, to be sustainable, to continue making an impact past the project life. So with that being said, one of the things that we're doing for that is to empower them from now, doing what they need to do. We'll have grant making workshops. We will have different types of workshops, like to empower them.
Yes.
Tracy will share more because she's over there and I'm telling you, she's ready to try me. Go ahead. Let me pass the mic. Go ahead.
So when it comes to understanding, you have to understand. So we have a number of different capacity building sessions worked into how we are helping persons. So not just you're going to understand how the colonial era actually impact what we are dealing with, and how do we move forward. We are going to look at arts, gender, and climate justice, because you can also integrate art as a mechanism for awareness and advocacy and education. We are going to look at climate finance and how do you sustainably work that, how do you work out how you best address all these issues in a sustainable way.
Have we started to trade carbon allotments?
Where we
Okay.
in the region.
I know Guyana had this conversation.
Guyana,
Definitely.
Bahamas, Barbados.
Some islands
but
don't
where
have
we are, there's actually, I was on a thing. So we're coming.
Okay.
We're coming.
All right. That's a different That's climate finance.
That's
climate finance.
That's a different show. How many shows you're getting out of this one
telling you.
interview?
Get tops and all these
This
things.
is gold. But we have all these things, and how do you communicate? How do you tell these narratives? Because narratives is very important, especially when you don't have data-driven information. So you actually need to tell that story, and how you tell that story.
show
So
the
we are going to be supporting these persons. They're actually a part of. We have 5 persons in the region, because it's across movements, Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific. So we have 5 entities that are doing the Lightful program right now that is helping them on how do they even attract donor funding for their individual NGOs and stuff. So again, we have thought about this.
That's
and
good.
it feels so good to know that we're here. Like, it's such an accomplishment for us to be here, because we are really, you see, again, goosebumps. You see, this is going to hit. This is going to hit, and this is going to change lives.
And I think
That's
it's
good.
important to know that even though we are here, we're looking at beyond here.
Yes.
And we are putting things in place to facilitate that things might change within the next year or two.
Yes.
Right, so we're trying to
Yes.
put processes and systems in place that allow for that flexibility, and understanding that our priorities is also influenced by the grantee partners as well, because that bottom-up approach again.
Yes.
Again.
So
Yes.
we just want
What
to
do they
acknowledge that we're
need?
putting things in place, we're looking at the future, but taking all of these things into account and noting that things will change. The Caribbean we're experiencing today is not the Caribbean we experienced 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
2 months ago.
2 months ago, last year.
So, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. So for us, I would just like to say thank you for giving us this opportunity and to sharing your platform so that we're able to use this platform
I learned
to
a lot. I learned a lot.
You know, we are looking forward to greater things ahead. Excited to be in St. Kitts.
Yeah.
I was so excited to fit.
Yeah.
I live my best life. But your country is beautiful, and I'm very, very happy to be a part of this committee with such strong women. Thank you as well to our funders, Global Fund for Women, USAID,
Yeah.
CWIL, you know, all of these organizations and partners
How many people
come
are here
together.
for the conference?
So it's it was about 35.
Okay.
But because of Hurricane Beryl, so there are 3 countries: Saint Lucia, Barbados,
St. Vincent.
St. Vincent,
And Guyana.
Guyana,
Who are not here.
who are not here because they couldn't get
Okay.
they couldn't fly in. But yes.
But I'm sure you recorded stuff and
Yes,
Of
yes,
course,
yes,
of
of course,
course.
of course,
Come
So
of
on.
cool.
course.
Well, I think that's all that we would have for today, because Socrates is already here for Voices that's coming up next. So I want to thank everyone who tuned in, listened via radio or on the streaming platforms.
Yes.
Tune into our episode of Money Matters, and I hope our discussion on feminist funding support in the Caribbean has provided you with some sort of valuable insights and on the critical intersection of gender, finance, and climate justice. And a special thank you to our esteemed guests and for all the amazing work that you're doing. I say congratulations. Your baby is being born. It's like, right?
Yes.
You've seen this, right?
Yes,
It's just
the
growing.
Yeah.
You know?
Birth. So as we wrap up, let's
Mm-hmm.
remember that addressing climate change requires inclusive and equitable solutions
Mm-hmm.
that empower all members of our community, especially those most affected. Feminist funding support is not just a financial issue, but a pathway to resilience and justice in the Caribbean.
Yes.
All right, so as usual, remember, I'm Dr. Terrance Martin. And it takes financial knowledge to know that you're making financial mistakes.
That's
Up next
true.
is Voices with Socrates.
Thank you.
Thank you.